Hello, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to this Texas Instruments Australia webinar event. And our topic this afternoon, an interesting one, creating digital lessons for online learning, something that is likely to be fairly important in the upcoming weeks and possibly months. Our presenter this evening, our stalwart presenter, Peter Fox. Good evening, Peter.
How are you, Brian?
Good, mate. Yeah, if not a little bit isolated, but thanks to facilities such as this, we can still get together and talk about all the important things. Meanwhile, you've got me. I'm Brian. I'm your host, also a T-Cubed trainer. A little bit more teaching time than Peter across a range of states and universities and so forth. And at the moment, I'm managing the T-Cubed Australia blog. You see the address of that on your screen now. And we're about to jump, so I'm just going to head across to Peter now, who has a range of interesting things for us. Basically, first of all, looking at the change with moving from what we know as a traditional classroom to an online learning environment. Now, different schools, of course, will already have their various learning management systems that they're using. I'm going to open a poll here to ask you what you're using, and hopefully we're going to give you some ideas of how you can really gain a bit more from that and make things a bit more interactive rather than just emailing messages back and forth between teacher and student. So I've just opened a poll there. So please respond to that while Peter is talking to us in the background. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Brian. What we're trying to do today is a combination of things. One is to demonstrate, I guess, as some of you are already aware, that you can use Webex as what we call a synchronous learning tool. Synchronous being that the students are online the same time as you are, as opposed to something like asynchronous, for example, a YouTube video, where they can watch it at any time. Bear in mind, of course, these events are recorded, so students could then go back and watch it just as you can later on. But as Brian's demonstrating, we can actually send out polls as well, and you'll see, as Brian's already told you, there's a chat space, there's a Q&A space. These are all things that you're going to need to keep in mind as we head towards what is potentially a reimagining of our classrooms. So I think it's a time where we're going to have to think outside the box somewhat. The paradigm has shifted significantly. Change can be very challenging or scary, even confronting, particularly when it's thrust upon us like it is now. But along with change comes opportunities. And I think we need to see these as an exciting opportunity in education right now. The idea being that we can rethink how students are going to be taught. Teaching online. So transitioning to that, from time to time, I'm guessing we've probably all planned the odd lesson, travelling to school, or dare I say, for some people, even walking to class. I say that with a sly grin because I've done that once before. Preparing for teaching online is, however, very different. We've got a range of teachers that work with us doing these online events, and they all find it a lot different. The dynamics and energy and interaction are not quite the same as what we'd experience in a classroom. You can walk into a classroom and see that the kids are all pumped and ready to go. They've got their books out. They're looking to see what you're about to start working with. There's something changed in the classroom. Or on the other hand, they might have come in after a long day and their heads are slumped down. They're not ready for work. You get that from the body language, and that's something that you will not see when you're delivering online content. So we find the experience from the teachers that work with us is that we have a much stronger focus on the content that we're going to deliver, the concepts and how they might be delivered and also received, particularly with some of the limitations you'll get from delivering online. At first, you'll find students are a little bit slow to jump on the chat or ask questions, but we've done webinars, or we did some last year with students, and they're actually a lot quicker than teachers. So just bear that in mind. You'll also need to think about the synchronous platforms. That's the poll that Brian is sending out for us. We're asking teachers, which platform is your school planning to use? Now, the most popular tend to be Webex, Zoom, and Microsoft Teams. There are, of course, other ones like YouTube Live. Some teachers have said FaceTime. I think that was an interesting one. Maybe your school hasn't decided yet, or you've got some other platform. Now, I haven't seen Brian's poll come up yet, but you could certainly let us know through the chat in the meantime the sorts of platforms that your school is considered using. The one obviously we're using today is Webex. So that's the one I'm most familiar with, but you'll see that they've got options to do things like raise your hand, which I think is kind of amusing, very much classroom style, the chat, and so on. And the next
Peter,
thing that we'll talk about...
Sorry, just interrupting there, Peter. The poll is open, and I'm thinking that the reason that you and I aren't seeing it on our screens is because we have already responded. Remember, we tried it in the practice.
That is very true. Yes,
but it is open, and I've now got approximately half of our online participants now have responded to it. There's 30 seconds remaining.
All right, what sort of response are we seeing? Is it Webex, Zoom, or not decided? And what's the...
I'm getting, there's some Webex. I'm getting mostly Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and other.
Ooh. Did they specify another? I guess they might not have had that opportunity. Maybe they could put the other in the chat.
Those of you who said other, if you could perhaps write it into the chat and let us know what you're using. Also, a couple of other people said no poll showing here. Okay. Look across into your panels, your communication panels for participants chat and Q&A. Polling is in there as one of them. Or maybe click on the three dots that I indicated before to see if it's there. Okay, Peter, yeah.
All right. So the last one that we'll work on is creating, saving and sharing mathematics content. For maths teachers, it's actually a little bit harder, I guess, than some other domains. I think science will struggle because I'm not sure how well they're going to be able to handle things like practical experiments if this school closures last for a long time. But certainly mathematics can be challenging, mainly because, of course, all the symbols and graphs and calculations. The question of how do we ferry them across a digital divide from school to home and back again, potentially. Some people might not be aware that TI-nspire was originally developed on a computer. There was myself and a handful of other people, Russell Brown and a gentleman from New South Wales, Steve Arnold. We're on one of the original testing teams where it was just a tiny piece of software that kind of evolved, and then we're about 18 months in before we saw our first calculator. So we sort of learnt it as a piece of software, and that's something perhaps teachers will need to get their head around. But once the calculator was created, the two platforms work together. So documents you create on your computer transfer directly into the calculator and back again if need be. The interesting thing, of course, in the school classroom situation, teachers generally focus on the calculator because that's what the kids have been taking into an exam. But if they're working from home, the computer's probably the easiest platform for them to use. And certainly when you're saving a document, you can just email it straight back to the teacher, and that the teacher can email that document back to them. So that's kind of where we're looking at today. It's a different space. But what I'm going to show you, because I know what some teachers will say, my students have thrown out their software, they didn't realise it came with a calculator, they've bought a second-hand calculator, they've lost their licence, all sorts of things. And teachers as well might struggle to have access to it, depending on the platform that they're using at their school. If it's a network licence, most of those will still work from home, but with some limitations, only 30 days. Otherwise, they've got to jump back on the network. So what we've done is we've put in a support package for schools that's completely free. It's on our website. You've got to go to the Australian website. And then if you click on download now, and don't take your time downloading it now. You can wait until the webinar is finished. So you can select software for teachers or software for students. And then once you've made your selections, it will give you a license number that is going to work for 6 months. And that's completely free. So we know that some schools actually loan calculators, or they only have them for classroom use. So therefore, now they'll have access to this environment at home as a piece of software, and therefore be able to save documents that you might send them. We've also got links to student tutorials. So that's one of our new resources that we're developing at the moment. And obviously, teacher webinars. I don't know whether teachers realise, but there's over 100 webinars that you can watch if you want to learn about how to create stuff. So, a whole lot of options for you. All right, so we want to reimagine the classroom. I've been to, I'm going to say, over 100 conferences over the last couple of years, and some of them talked about classrooms of the future and what they might look like. I've been in lots of schools as I've been around the country visiting various institutions, various types of furniture, whiteboards, electronic screens, touch screens, rooms that almost completely transform, but they all kind of have this sort of familiar sort of environment. But I think when we try and imagine what our classroom's looking like going forward, I don't think any of us imagined it would look like this. This is the sort of sad state of affairs that we're potentially moving towards, is that the classrooms will be empty and our kids will be at home, and that's the challenges that we're going to face. So let's get into reimagining the classroom. Currently, I think most of us think of 25 students in a classroom, but we need to stop and think, why do we have 25 kids? What are the limiting factors? Obviously, the physical size of the classroom, the furniture requirements, timetables, industrial agreements, classroom management, noise levels, all sorts of things force us to take in just 25 students in the classroom, and for some of us that seems too many at times. But in this webinar environment, we could have 100 people on, 150 people. It makes no difference really to our preparation. They just log in and they're all tuning into the same thing. So do we need to have one teacher per classroom? Or could it be one teacher teaching the entire year level at the same time, because our timetables will be different too? Or the kids can get back on and watch the recorded version if they need to. So I don't think we need to think about 25 kids in a classroom. It could be a lot bigger. And we don't have to worry about sending students off to the coordinators or running next door to grab some extra chairs or worrying about the noise level, because it's irrelevant. If we're teaching online, we've all got access to 100 kids if we want to. So I think it's an amazing opportunity for teachers to work collaboratively. That is, they can share the content and concepts and sequence them and then prepare who's going to deliver what section, and then each teacher can then, if they need to, assess their own students' work, because I think that's probably a slightly more traditional approach. Because I think if every teacher tries to do their own thing, we might find that they're overworked. Certainly the teachers that I've been speaking to over the last week or two, since Victorian schools have started to close their doors, have been overwhelmed with the amount of work that they're trying to create. And I think largely the ones I've been speaking to is because their concept is still, I need to teach my class, not my subject across the school year level. So that's something. The other thing I want to talk about, like we've got 3 platforms there. We referenced them earlier on. The Webex logo is now the new logo is the one on the left, and then Zoom. But I wanted to throw into Brian, if he's got a minute, to talk about why, for example, with the years that TI have been doing this, why we've got 2 people on board. Many teachers will try and tackle this themselves. I'm the presenter, so what does Brian do in his role of moderating? So do you want to give them an insight as to what you're doing, Brian?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. It's a model that we've been using for quite some time now. As you just mentioned, we initially set this up with, say, 2 presenters, and we can swap the presentation rights from one to another. And we have tried that with just the 2 presenters running it, but it becomes quite cumbersome. It really helps if you've got a separate host which is the role that I've been doing quite a lot in recent years. And on the particular piece of software I've got, and of course some of our participants said they're using other platforms, it's helpful if there's a host who manages the technical difficulties. So if students or participants are logging in and have any issues with sound, for example, to assist with that. And also transitioning between presenters if you're using more than one presenter. But the other main one is that when people are presenting, they've got to really focus on that, and it's very difficult to be monitoring the chat and responding to that at the same time. So I've found that my main role as host has been to respond to questions and comments that come up in the chat so that it remains interactive rather than just a static presentation. Having just said that, I'll point out that this is being recorded, and you will be able to access the recording of this event, but of course you won't have access to all of the chat and the interactivity that, of course, the lifetime participants were able to engage in.
That's a good point, Brian. Yep.
Yeah. And that is why, if you can, it's always better to watch the event live. As we go into this sort of strange scenario of our, distance ed classes, in my view, I think it would be better if we can try to still have some sort of live time events for our students rather than just sending and receiving files. I know that the sending and receiving files, whether that be through your school platform, that might be a way that we're more accustomed to. Like, for example, you're using your school learning management software or Moodle or whatever. And our systems are well set up for that. If you're wanting to do that, then if you've got the study and the exercises that you had in your work plan already, sure, the TI-nspire files are very, very useful for that. But I also encourage some live time lessons, so to speak, which Peter has just been talking about. So utilising whatever software you're familiar with, I really encourage setting up classes where you might have all of a year level, you might have all of year 8 tuning in at a particular time with, say, two teachers team teaching a lesson and a third teacher moderating and handling the background chat. Or you might need more if you've got all of the year level. So that's the sort of model that you might wish to explore. For files that do go backwards and forwards, the TI-nspire files, because you can actually save them through a file management system, I think that is really useful. I'm no longer school-based teaching, but I can tell you if I were right now, what I would be wanting to do would be to maintain as much as possible the curriculum plan that I already had set in place for the school year. That might involve students reading studying particular topics, but definitely completing exercises. How do they prove to me that they've completed those exercises, or to ask questions about it? If they do their work on the TI-nspire software, save their work as TI-nspire files, and then send it to me through whatever communication system we're using, whether that's email or a platform where they can submit their work. So TI-nspire file management, absolutely terrific for this, and I know that's what I would be using. I would also be setting some extended investigations. I'm hoping teachers are familiar with our website. If not, I'll type that into the chat as well. There's lots of extended activities that students can that you can download with a worksheet for students, with an answer sheet for teachers. Sure, if students find their way to the same website, they can find the answers as well. But hang on, isn't that similar to just looking to the back of a textbook anyway? So I'll show those. I would also be wanting my students to be watching some useful video tutorials and we have that on our website as well in the student resources section. I'll just quickly show you a couple of those things.
Just while Brian's getting those ready, one of the things or tasks that I've given to my students in the past is if I'm doing a particular topic and I know there's lots of instructional videos online on YouTube, for example, one of the tasks I got students to do in the past was they had to watch 3 videos on the same topic, obviously by different people, not just replay, and then they wrote a critical assessment of them. And the students can be pretty scathing in their assessments of the videos, but by and large, they chose reasonable videos. They learnt how to do the calculations. Let's say it was solving simultaneous equations. But it also enlightened me to the fact that the students tended to watch videos that were somewhere about 4 minutes in duration. They didn't click on the ones that were 15 or 20 minutes. So I found that was interesting. So it's a task that you can even give your students. You don't have to prepare a video for every topic that you're going to teach because a lot of them are already on YouTube.
Absolutely. And it's one that, particularly I noticed through my TAFE teaching where I had adult students, they would be constantly on YouTube, for their additional research. So on your screen now is the main page for Texas Instruments Australia. If you just type education.ti.com/en-au, that's the English Australian version, or just Google Texas Instruments Australia. You'll see the tabs here for teachers and for students. Now, under Teachers Professional Development, this is where you have access to the backlog of webinars. So you see there, you can either register for an upcoming webinar or you can look at the on-demand webinars. So this is what Peter referred to before, and that's where you'll see the list of all of our previous events. So that's good. The other main one that I have used under the Teacher tab, you see Australian Curriculum Inspired and Senior Curriculum Inspirations. Now, these are terrific for the downloaded lessons. I've just gone into Australian Curriculum Inspired. I don't know, let's go Year 7. Let's say I've got a lesson on number and algebra. And of course, these are tied in to the Australian curriculum. Or that one's a test. You can actually do that file as a test for students to work on. This one's an activity. And if I go into this, what I will get if I download it is that there's a student activity and there's teacher notes. So, and also the TI-nspire files for students to work on. So that's a fantastic resource. The other one for students under Student Resources tab, we've recently extended our webinar program to direct webinars specifically to students. So that's this this little professor fellow here, and this is particularly a great resource. Tutorials by state, subject, and device. So we can tap them into things like this, as you can see. Another part of that, really targeted more for the end of the year, is the Prepare for Exams series, again, state by state and topic by topic. And they're short tutorials that are recorded and also linked and available from our YouTube channel. So that's what I would be looking at. Back onto the Webex thing, if you, again, as Peter was saying, I'd certainly want to be, I would want to be running some live lesson presentations for my students because in my role as host for the Texas Instruments webinar program, this is one of the things that I developed. Peter, I could put this in the sharing documents if people are interested.
Yeah,
just some little tips, simple stuff like have a glass of water available. Ensure that there's other, that you've eliminated as best possible other noise that might be in your house. Barking dogs and so forth. Turn off other applications on your computer, etc. just some tips on that. I'll go back to our Webex now. So,
and even a really simple one, while Brian's going back to the Webex that he's reminded me of with his tips there, what participants don't realise is that Brian and I are actually using two computers at the same time. So I've got one which has my presentation on it, and the other, and I'm logged in as a presenter, and then the other one, I'm logged in as a student, just so I can see what the students are saying, because if you forget to share something, and it can happen pretty easily, you're sitting there chatting away about it, and the kids are getting going, what's he talking about? Because it's something different on the screen. So having a second computer logged in as a student in the background is always good to make sure that they're seeing what you think they're seeing.
Yes. Sometimes also, depending on your internet connections, there can be a lag when you swap from one, say, PowerPoint slide to another, or one screen to another. So it's helpful to see how that lag's going to try and match your voice with the screens that are on display. Since I transferred the presentation rights back to Peter, and I'm no longer presenting, it's given me an opportunity to read the chat more, and I'm seeing some of the comments, and thank you for those. Some people saying it's an odd feeling when you're presenting, because you're talking into the quietness, you're talking into the void, and that's a very important thing. You don't get the eye-to-eye contact and the facial feedback from students. So it is a harder challenge. And yeah, someone's also saying that sometimes the different systems can be down. I don't know if that's a reference to school systems, for the presentation platforms.
No, I can fill you in on that one, Brian, because some of them are being absolutely overloaded, because we're not the only country in the world going to online schooling. So it may become an issue as we go forward. And depending, like if any of our participants actually want to say something, this is the other thing that we can do. We're happy to experiment a little bit in this session, is that we can actually unmute their microphone and have them chat to the group. So if any of the people online have actually got something that they want to share with everyone, I'll start off on an activity, and then Brian can have a chat to them behind the scenes, again, the role of a host. And if they've got something that they want to share, we can quickly and easily promote them. So it doesn't have to be, just like you'd be in the classroom, you get a student out front to share and prepare and show something to the rest of the class. If one of our participants wants to do that, we can quite easily throw across to them, and they can share something that they've got or their experience. Now, while Brian's having a chat, Yeah,
I was just going to say, that takes us into a different dimension from our normal webinars. Usually in our webinars, for a start, the attendees don't see the list of other attendees. That's just the way that we chose to set it up for privacy issues. So you, as a teacher at home watching this webinar, are anonymous, unless you choose otherwise. You do have the ability to click on an icon to raise your hand, and that's on the right-hand side in your next to your name. There's a hand raise option. So you can, if you wish to raise your hand, you could practice that. And normally we do not assign presentation rights to the participants. But if you do wish to have a go, if you want to share something on your screen, practice that out, give it a go. And I can, as host, I can promote you to being a panelist, and then we can test that out. That could be like your question and answer with your students. Yeah,
that's right.
Yep.
All right, so I'll get started on an example, one where we can use the Inspire software to create content. So sure, Brian showed you we can download stuff, and I'll jump on if I get a chance and show you some of those. But I thought I might just give you an example. So here's a typical sort of concept that students or property that students need to know about angles and arcs and circles, about the size of the angle when it's measured to the centre compared to a point on the circumference. So I'll just swap across to my Inspire software, there's a rather morbid projection of what's going on with our virus. Then I'll create a new document. And this one, because I'm using my calculator or my software as a calculator, it's chosen to come up in that way. So there I am busy on a geometry space, and I want to create this interactive content. So first thing I want to do is create a circle. There we go. Now, this document will appear exactly the same if I put it on a calculator. But let me show you a different thing. Remembering, if we're creating these for students to work from home with, if I go up to File and I choose Computer Page Size, you'll notice that the menu in the top left-hand corner is much smaller. If I put the calculator here, nothing works, the buttons don't work. But switch across to, let's say here, and you can access all your templates. I can click and I can still add geometry, the same as I would on the computer software. Now if I go back to my tools, there's all the menus I'd see if I press the menu button anyway. So I've still got access to everything. So now I'm going to draw a circle. I might just shimmy him across a little bit. Much easier now that I've got access to my computer mouse. And then we'll create a segment going from here to here, going from here to here, and another one, and another one. Then we'll measure some angles. So let's take a measurement. I'm going to use a directed angle. That means it matters which order I click the points. So see, that way it's gone round and done the reflex angle. If I go this way, that's the one I want. So I'll do the same for this angle up here. And currently I've got automatically labeled points switched off. It doesn't matter because you can go back and label them if you want to. That way you've got control over where those labels are. Let's call that point P. Move them a little bit, and we'll call this one Q. So I've got some angles, and now I've created my interactive document. Now, if I want to save it, just File, Save As, give it a name, and tell it where you're going to save it. Then you can email it on to students. But I'm not finished yet, because within this, we've also got this lovely application called a Notes application. So I could just insert notes, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the screen. It's not something I do a lot on the calculator because the screen might be a bit small. But here you can see I've still got a decent amount of space to work with. I'm going to add some notes in, and I could just put some instructions over here. That's fairly trivial. Or I could insert a template. And I can put math symbols in here too if I don't like using the word angle. We can use the symbols tools down here. Angle, A, B, B, and angle A, Q, B. And you've got a spot for students to write their answer. And that's pretty cool, pretty quick and easy. So it's laid out nicely. Another option, I might as well just leave that one up here. Now what's this? I'm going back onto my geometry application, and I'll right click and I'll store that value, let's say in X. And I'll store this one in Y. And back over here, I could do insert a math box, and I'll write X, and I'll write Y. And now I'm going to write X divided by Y. So you can see it's always double. So students start to get familiar with the idea or the use of a math box, and they can start to put stuff in here. they could also start to add to your diagram by either copying that page, because if I go back here, I could just right-click on that and copy it and paste it. I can paste it into the same space, or I could insert a new problem and paste it in here. Now I've got a duplicate of it, and I can leave the original one and then just explore problem number 2 and add stuff as perhaps I'm trying to prove this result rather than just observe what's going on. You can see here you've got to reactivate the math boxes and so on. So that's how easy it is to create an interactive document and how easy it is for students to navigate. And you've got genuine mathematical content that you can send to students, deliver to them, or just demonstrate. All right, so that's that one. Let's try a different one. I think I created one over here. Here we go. I'm just wary of the time. This is one we might use for, say, calculus. So I've split the graph application into 2. And on the left-hand side, I've got a point which I can drag along and see the tangent to the curve. And on the right-hand side, and I've relabeled my axes over here, this is my graph of dy dx, and I can see that it's got a negative value currently. And I've left this little thing down here to show you how that's being done, and I'll show you that in just a moment. So I can move around here and see that at the turning points, the graph on the right crosses through the axis, the x-axis. And if I move across, get to a turning point, and I see another x-axis intercept on my derivative. So you can see it's quite a visual tool that you can be using in the classroom, but it works equally well on the online classroom. So how did I project that point across? It's not hard to see, like this one is just an equation to a function. That was easy. And over here, my other one, I've just put the graph of the derivative of whatever's stored in y1. That's why that's sitting there. This is just a point on the x-axis and then dotted that down to the curve. That's only so that I can move x and create, in a sense, a constant rate of change rather than trying to slide it. But all I did is I got the coordinates of that point, and then I stored it in A. Then, let me just delete this value. I just typed the letter A in here as text, and then I said, calculate it. I know what it is. It's on the other side. But watch what happens is I change this value. It's the same up here as it is down here. It was just a way of swapping it onto the other page. Then what I want to do is get that measurement and put it on the x-axis. Now, here's where we're going to be careful. If you've got 2 applications on the one page, I've got to click to activate the other application to make sure I'm in the right one. And then under the geometry tools, a construction tool is to transfer measurement. So I'll get that number and plot it on the x-axis. You might have seen it just appear over here, negative 1.04. Now, if I come back to this one and move it along, you can see my point over here is following along with me. So then I'll go back onto this side, geometry, construct a perpendicular line, perpendicular to the x-axis, passing through that point, and then a point of intersection between there and there. I don't like the big line, it's a preference, so I'll hide it. And then we'll just drop a segment between the two. Don't want my segment too prominent, so you can change the colour, change whether it's a dotted line, whatever you want to do to it. Just to make it a little bit less significant. And there we are, that's it. Now, of course, if that was too quick, that's okay. You've got the recorded version, you're good to go. Now, just going back to the website, Brian sort of gave you a quick tour. Let me give you an example, let's say in senior mathematics. So some of these documents, these interactive documents, already have content answers for the students to go through. They're not just demonstration files. So let's choose something like, I'm thinking methods. And we'll choose something from algebra and 3D equations. So there's a student activity, teacher notes, and then find the Inspire file, or you can hit the zip one and download the lot. I'm just going to click on this one, 3D equations. I think I've already opened it on here. There it is there. And that's the file that you see on the website. And now it's on my calculator, on my software. So I'm going to start with question 1, which is equation set 1. There's my 3 equations. Navigate to page 2. There are the 3 equations in 3 dimensions. That's equation 1, 2, and 3. We can take out equation 3, that plane. We can look at equations 1 and 3, or 2 and 3. So we can see that they intersect as lines and get some idea on what we're aiming for once we start trying to do the simultaneous equations. So here, I can choose whether I'm going to add or subtract equation 1 and 2. I'm thinking if I wanted to eliminate y, I could multiply the first equation by 1 and multiply the second equation by 2. And you can see down the bottom, I've eliminated y. It's got 1 times equation 1 plus 2 times equation 2, and it gives us an answer that does not have a y in it. So then I can navigate on to the next page, and my objective now is to try and remove y once again. I think this time we'll subtract. We'll multiply the first one by 3 and the second one by 1, and down the bottom I've eliminated y. Then I can go on to the next page, and you'll see that it's grabbed equation 4 and 5, that is those 2 results, drop them on here, so I can eliminate x. And that's already been done just because we were playing around with it before. And now I can get my solution that z equals -1. Then I could go back to the previous equation or the previous page and try and figure out what x is and then what y is and so on. Or at any point, once I've got these equations like 5x minus 11z equals 26, I could graph that back on this page and see that it's a line, that line that's the intersection of those 2 planes. So this content is already developed for you. You don't have to create it. You can send students the question sheet. You've got the answer sheets, and you're good to go. So that's that one. Another one from Further Maths. And I was in 2 minds as to whether or not to show this one because my heart was broken just the other day when I heard what was happening with the AFL. And I'm sure Brian's is as well, because I know he's a passionate Richmond supporter and I'm a Collingwood supporter. And then to see what was happening with the football, one thing that keeps us sane during the winter months, it's pretty tragic, isn't it, Brian?
It is tragic, but one good thing out of it, you're aware that the Mighty Tigers remain premiers definitely for another year.
Oh no, that had not crossed my mind.
Even though we would have won another flag this year, and certainly would have beaten your lot tomorrow night, as it was to be. Yeah.
Most likely in 2021, if you win the premiership, then assuming there's no premiership this year, you could say that no one has beaten Richmond in a premiership for 3 years.
Yes, that is correct.
That would be a legitimate statement.
Yeah.
Ah, dear. Oh, man, it's getting worse. Sorry, folks. All right, let's have a quick look at this one. So, again, we're just saving teachers' work because here's all the data from the... I should put the 2018 and 19... I would sadly can't put... Well, I could put the first part of the 2020 season on. I did all right. So the objective here is for students to figure out what is the thing that most influences a team's probability of winning. So we have their final position on the ladder, how many wins they had, how many kicks their teams got on average in each game and so on. So let me just drop in a data and statistics application. And we can go down here and we'll say, let's say the number of games that they won. So I think that one was called wins or something. Yep, there it is. So that's the total number of wins for the season for each of the teams. And then we can say, I think that well, what do you think, Brian? Do you think it's goals that influences the probability of a team winning, the highest number of goals for the season, or the number of free kicks, which is obviously what the spectators think?
Yeah, I think the goals might have a bit more to do with it.
So there's a bit of a correlation. Certainly the teams that went well, but not necessarily. I mean, look at this team that only had 6 wins, and they averaged 13 goals. You've got to wonder what's going on, don't you? And that's even something for students to try and explain. How is it possible that this team had only 6 wins and yet they averaged 13 goals? And here's a team over here with 11 wins that averaged 11.8 goals. That's 11.8 goals as opposed to 11 goals, 8 points, by the way. But there is a reasonable correlation there, and we can drop in our line of best fit, or maybe clangers. That might be a reverse relationship, right? The less clangers you have, turns out it's pretty much irrelevant.
Yeah.
So it seems to me if there's any slight uphill projection there, that the more clangers you have, the better your team goes. But of course, we should also put that in context that it's probably because they possess the ball more than their opposition.
More possession, yes.
Yeah. So it's not a cause and effect one, but an interesting one for students to look at. What about disposals if they hog the ball?
I reckon that might be part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Centre clearances. How about centre clearances?
Yeah, centre clearances. Here we go. Centre clearances. So Maxi Gorn and all those other wonderful ruckmen, you're pretty useless. You don't have any influence over the game looking at that. Yeah. So that's another activity, and students can just generate their line of best fit and see which one does. In the actual activity, it also says you can combine things. So Brian thought it was probably goals. So he could say, I'm going to put 0.6 towards goals, add on 0.5, or no, not 0.5, maybe 0.3 towards centre clearances, if that's what his thought was, and say whatever other value he wants on, let me just have a look at another one, maybe disposals, you thought, wasn't it? So you could put those and weight them and see if you get a stronger correlation. So the aim is for the kids to get the strongest correlation and say, well, here's how we think a team should focus on the various aspects of the game to get the strongest correlation. But in the meantime, your kids have all come up with all of these ideas. Is that correlated, yes or no?
Yeah,
really simple activity, all the hard work's done.
Yeah, I do know that this is a very serious area, that all of the clubs have got expert analysts crunching through all this data. A book that I read recently. A book I read recently, Yellow and Black, a year with Richmond, and they talked about the amount of data collection and analysis that is done. Once again, this points out to our students the amount of work that can be available to them in an area of interest, if football is their interest, that they can get jobs in this area.
That's right.
The clubs want them; they're employable. Peter, I'm just thinking, and I know you do have other things on your agenda there, but I'm just wondering how sure or unsure participants are of how something like this can be saved as a TNS file. We talk about these file types. If they've created something on this software, which is now freely available for them and students to download, if they create a file and save it and wish to send that to their students or the other way around, how is that done?
All right, so same as I would on any other piece of software. It's a good question, Brian. So I'll go up and I'll put this, that doesn't really correspond to calculus, so let's just go into tutorial series. I'll put it into a new folder and let's call this my assignment. So you can see the title then changes to my assignment. I can close it off. And then if I want to
how did you save that? That was under File, wasn't it, on the top left?
File. Yep, File and Save As. So let me just reopen it. You can see it'll pop up under
Same as any other.
Yep, or I can go to Open Document.
Yep.
And it just remembers the last folder that it was sitting in. And then Open.
And the extension type there is .tns, which is TI-nspire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
so
to email it
you
back
can
to
email
the same as you'd email it a Word document or PowerPoint or photo. You just go into your email. Mine's closed off at the moment. And then just construct your email, add your attachment. Or students also generally in schools have opportunities to upload to a school portal. So the same thing, if they were uploading a Word document, they just upload the TNS file and that's it. You can save them as a PDF, but it's not something that I would generally do. Oh, hang on, I think it's under convert, sorry. File, convert to publish view, computer file. Oh, you can change the dimensions. I vaguely recall that you could save it as a PDF as well, which basically just screen dumps all of the content. But I don't think that would be useful because once a student's, let's say, done their assignment here, and let's say they put their line of best fit in here, then, and you're the teacher now reviewing this, you can just go insert notes, and we could say insert a comment, teacher comment.
Great. And so the file, it's a little bit like a Word file in that respect, in that it can be sent back and forth between people working on it with comments added as it's upgraded.
Yeah, that's right. So here I'm teaching, I've just put in a comment. I think you could have chosen a better possession type for the correlation. I'll save that as file, save as, and then I'll say with comments. And then I would email that back to the student and say, in the email, I'd say, you know, check out tab 1.4. I've put some comments there for you. And you can add labels to things as well in some of the aspects of it. What people might not be able to or might not have realised either, this is a calculator application, and there's also insert comment here as well.
Yeah, that's handy. So if you've asked students to complete a series of exercises, for example, they can just open up, let's say it's a calculator page that's applicable, they can show all they're working on there, step by step, and even type in by accessing that add comment, insert comment, and that can be comments from student to teacher, for example. Or it could even be, sorry, Mr. Fox, I really don't get this bit. Could you please help me here?
Yeah. And also,
I can see that as tremendously powerful.
You can also rename a problem. So this might be Chapter 1, Exercise 2, Question 1. So that's what this problem is called. And then if I insert another problem, you can see my first one might be the answer to Chapter 1, Exercise 2, Question 1. And then I can call this one something different. So I just right-click on it and rename it.
Absolutely, yep. And actually what you're demonstrating here, Peter, I remember when one of my daughters was doing specialist maths, which wasn't offered at my school at the time, and she was doing that by distance ed, and she used the TI-nspire software for evidence of her assignments. That's exactly what she used. The other one is that you can also do a screen grab using this software and drop it into a Word document or other types of documents. You might want to demonstrate that for us with the little camera.
Yeah. So there's a little camera tool here. I'm not using my phone. I'm using the on-screen one, and I'll just go capture page. It doesn't capture the whole screen. It's just capturing this part. And then if I went and, let's say, circle properties was one I was playing around with, and I want to drop it in here, Control-V will paste it. Then you can just drag it and resize it. And there it is.
Very
so then
useful.
You can add their comments there. And of course, the other advantage is if they were doing any mathematical calculations, let's suppose it's in, doesn't matter whether it's, let's do a calculus one, shall we? I'm just trying to think. Calculations, calculus, integral. That would take quite a while to do, even in equation editor. But Control-J is your shortcut in case you want to use that. and Control V, paste it, shrink it, and there it is in there.
Right, terrific. Yep. Peter, if I could just throw another question in, as I said before, I'm monitoring the chat in the background. Just one of the things that was on the free software offer, that actually includes the iPad apps. So the apps for iPad, for schools that are using iPads.
Nice.
Yeah, so that I think that's a terrifically generous offer there. The question has come in: is version 5.1 available on that? Because I know that's actually
on
only
the iPad app.
By CX2, yes.
Not on the iPad app, but the software that teachers get. So let me just jump on here. You can see it refers to the CX Premium software. And it's not just the premium software. If they're using the TI-30 or if we've got teachers that are using the TI-84, they can download any one of those softwares and get a free 6-month license.
Oh, wow, the TI-30 as well. That's great. Yep.
Yep, it's all there.
Again, sorry for me interrupting, but that's the one that, again, in my school, we use that in our junior classes because that's a fantastic little scientific calculator. We book listed that from year 7 to 9, and I do use the demonstrator software for that. I found that as a very useful tool. I got that through the volume purchase program, and so I'd have that on my computer for, again, demonstrating for the class. So that's a very useful one. But with this remote learning...
Brian, because I know we're running out of time here. This is the student one, and what we're trying to do is slowly, as we get time, not only just add the tutorial. So this one is where they can play it, and then they can watch it. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. But you'll see it pops up a little window, it says calculating Z-scores. And if you're going to watch, sadly, you're going to have to listen to me. This one's a rather funny one. It says, so what if we were trying to compare scores of people that played Space Invaders, when it first came out back in the 70s, compared to now, playing it on a computer? Their averages are different. So how do we compare those different averages? So as long as we know the standard deviation of the scores, so it gives some sample scores along there. So it's a bit sort of playful in the sense that it says, okay, here's the high scores. There's one for Buzz and Sky and so on. And then high scores for Chris. How can we compare Buzz's high score? We compare them to the average. So Buzz is 210 above the average. Chris is 320 above the average. It's still meaningless unless we know the standard deviation. So it gives a bit of a context for the students to follow along. And then once they're done, they can just download the question sheet. You can see that's downloading there. And then there's some questions for them to answer. And if they forget how to do it, that little QR code, they can scan that with their phone. It'll take them straight back to the video, or they can click on the link and it will go straight back to that video. So, quick and easy questions. And because they're student sheets, of course, we also threw the answers on the back because it's designed for students to go off and do their practice. And, of course, it's all free. Another win.
I'm just typing in.
We're about out.
Yep. I was just typing in that a lot of what you demonstrated there is also available through the new TI Australia student blogs site. Yes.
If I transfer back to you, have you got the blog handy? You could show teachers a blog. Students can register for that.
Yep.
Are you able to get that blog up, and then I'll...
Yep. I shall grab that.
Yep.
Yep. So you're done there?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just show that. I'll just type the address into the chat there.
Oh, nice.
But
Thank you.
This is the student blog, which is just new this year. So the address for that, TIstudents.wordpress.com. And Peter has been busy making a lot of these how-to videos. And as you can see on the panel on the right, you're invited to search by state and by topic. tremendously useful resource there. And the other one that I've been managing is the teacher blog, t3australia.blog, T3 standing for T-Cubed, Teachers Teaching with Technology. So there's some of those videos there as well, but also a range of articles. I've written a few articles here, and reflection pieces, or it could be activities. Actually, there's quite a lot on there. That's all gone up in the last month. Here's one by Peter. That was from a conference. And modelling rocket launches, you name it. All sorts of goodies in there.
That looks like Stephen Broderick, is it?
That one's Stephen Broderick, yep. Yeah. And the other great resource, of course, is our YouTube channel, which if you just go to YouTube and just look for, again, TI Australia, you can see here it's one of my subscribed sites, and there's a wealth of videos, including lots of these webinars linked on there.
Can I just recommend a good one for teachers to watch? I know we've got a few teachers on board. Do a YouTube search for Grant Sanderson. You can even type it in now, Brian, so they'll get to the right spot. Yep. Grant Sanderson, TED Talk. There it is, second one down.
Yep.
Now, Grant does the, I think it's 3 blue, 1 brown YouTube channel. And it's the second video down, Engage with Maths, Grant Sanderson. It's his TED Talk. And so I've got to give punters this one. I'm not going to tell them what the answer is, but Grant demonstrates it in the video. You've got 2 blocks colliding, and then there's a wall.
We get the
You've got a large block, a large block, and then there's a small block in between the large one and the wall. So the large block is heading towards the wall. It collides into the small one. It hits the wall and rebounds, hits the large block and bounces backwards and forwards. And his question is, how many times will it bounce backwards and forwards? Right? And then he changes the size of the big block and makes it get bigger so we get more bounces backwards and forwards of this little block. It will blow your mind when you see the answer. So as soon as you finish watching this, check this out. It is so good. Watch the whole video, but certainly this section on the colliding blocks, brilliant.
Terrific. Okay, we're going to have lots and lots to be looking at over the next little space of time. So, as with a lot of things that might initially seem, oops, that's not the one I want. So, it may initially seem like a bit of a challenge. I think we should also be looking for opportunity, and certainly the opportunity to look towards some of our online learning and practicing with different platforms and the like. Hopefully we'll get something good out of all of this. I know something before I just mentioned with my at my school, where the TI-nspire, we didn't introduce it until year 10. And of course my students required the use of that for their VCE exams. With the current offer that TI have put on the table, I would be encouraging students from year 7 to be installing this software and getting used to it, because that's kind of like a free kick for us to have them practicing that before they get up to the senior years. So that's what I would be doing anyway. We've gone over time there, Peter, but so much to talk about. And thank you, attendees. When we do go to the feedback, could you please, and this is a really important one at this time, please give us some ideas of what else you would like in support over the coming time. And we will do our best, because we do have a very expert and experienced team of trainers to draw upon to prepare materials for you. So if you let us know what you're interested in, we will do our best to try to meet your needs. So thank you once again, Peter.
Thank you, Brian.
now's the time for any final questions or thank yous to Peter typed into the chat. As I said, you'll be taken to the feedback panel when I close the event. As always, this is registered PD. You can claim this as part of your mandatory PD hours. So you'll be getting a certificate in your email within the next couple of days. And as I've mentioned before, the recording of this will be available for you as well. If you're not subscribed to the newsletter and the blogs, please jump onto that so that we can continue to keep you informed. And that's it for this afternoon. So good afternoon to everyone, and thank you once again for joining us.
Thanks, Brian.